Saloth Sar, better known as Pol Pot, was the mastermind behind one of the most horrific genocides in human history. Born in 1925 in rural Cambodia, his early life provided little indication of the brutality he would later unleash. He received an education, even studying radio electronics in France. It was during this time that he was exposed to communist ideology, a force that would shape his destiny. Upon returning to Cambodia in 1953, Pol Pot joined the Indo-Chinese Communist Party. He gradually rose through the ranks, adopting the alias Pol Pot in 1963. His charisma and radical vision attracted followers, forming the core of what would become the Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot's ideology was a toxic blend of Maoism, Khmer nationalism, and a utopian vision of an agrarian society. He envisioned a Cambodia purged of foreign influence, modern technology, and intellectualism. This vision, however warped, resonated with some segments of a Cambodian society grappling with poverty and instability. As the Vietnam War spilled over into Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge capitalized on the chaos. They presented themselves as a nationalist force fighting against foreign imperialism and corruption. Their message, coupled with brutal efficiency, drew recruits and sowed the seeds of terror that would soon engulf Cambodia. The Vietnam War had a devastating impact on Cambodia, destabilizing the government and creating an opening for the Khmer Rouge. The United States, seeking to disrupt North Vietnamese supply lines, began bombing Cambodian territory in 1969. This controversial campaign, while targeting communist forces, resulted in significant civilian casualties and fueled anti-government sentiment. Capitalizing on the chaos and resentment, the Khmer Rouge, under Pol Pot's leadership, steadily gained control of rural areas. They presented themselves as liberators, promising peace and prosperity to a war-weary population. Their true intentions, however, remained masked behind a facade of revolutionary rhetoric. On April 17, 1975, the Khmer Rouge marched into Phnom Penh, the Cambodian capital. Their victory marked the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in human history. The population, accustomed to years of conflict, had little reason to suspect the horrors that awaited them. The Khmer Rouge's takeover was swift and brutal. They immediately ordered the evacuation of all cities and towns, forcing millions of people into the countryside. This forced exodus, carried out with shocking cruelty, was the first step in Pol Pot's plan to transform Cambodia into his vision of an agrarian utopia. Upon seizing power, the Khmer Rouge declared it Year Zero, signifying their intention to dismantle Cambodian society and rebuild it from scratch. Cities, once vibrant centers of life, were transformed into ghost towns. Money, religion, education, and private property were all abolished. The Khmer Rouge's vision was a radical agrarian society, where everyone worked on collective farms. They sought to erase all traces of Cambodia's history, culture, and traditions. Books were burned, temples destroyed, and intellectuals persecuted. The regime imposed a strict social hierarchy. At the top were the Angkar, the organization that controlled every aspect of life. Below them were the old people, those living in the countryside before the Khmer Rouge takeover. At the bottom were the new people, the evacuated city dwellers who were subjected to the harshest treatment. Life under the Khmer Rouge was one of unimaginable hardship and terror. Forced labor, starvation, disease, torture, and execution became commonplace. The regime's cruelty knew no bounds, targeting anyone perceived as a threat to their twisted ideology. The Cambodian genocide was not a single event, but a systematic campaign of extermination that unfolded over 4 long years. The Khmer Rouge, driven by their ideology and paranoia, established a vast network of prisons and killing fields across the country. Tuol Sleng, a former high school converted into Security Prison 21, or S21, became a symbol of the regime's cruelty. Here, prisoners were subjected to unimaginable torture, forced to confess to crimes they did not commit. Those who survived the horrors of S21 were transported to the killing fields, sites like Cheong Ek, where they were executed and buried in mass graves. The methods of execution were often barbaric, designed to save bullets. Prisoners were bludgeoned, stabbed, or had their throats slit. The exact death toll remains unknown, but estimates range from 1.25 to 3 million, a staggering figure for a country with a population of around 8 million at the time. Cambodia, under the Khmer Rouge, became a killing field, where life held little value and death was omnipresent. Section 5. Targets of terror, victims of the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge's brutality was indiscriminate, targeting anyone perceived as an enemy of the revolution. Certain groups, however, were singled out for particularly brutal treatment. Ethnic minorities, including Vietnamese, Cham Muslims, and Chinese Cambodians, were targeted for extermination. The regime saw them as a threat to their vision of a racially pure Cambodia. Intellectuals, professionals, artists, and anyone with an education were also targeted. The Khmer Rouge feared their influence and sought to create a society devoid of independent thought. Even those within the Khmer Rouge's ranks were not safe. Suspicions and paranoia were rampant, leading to purges and executions within the party itself. No one was safe from the regime's reign of terror. Section 6. The world takes notice. International response and Vietnamese intervention. The world was slow to react to the horrors unfolding in Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge's isolationist policies and tight control of information made it difficult to assess the true scale of the atrocities. Some countries, like China, continued to support the Khmer Rouge regime. Others, like the United States, while aware of the human rights abuses, were preoccupied with the aftermath of the Vietnam War and hesitant to intervene. In December 1978, Vietnam, citing border clashes and seeking to end the Khmer Rouge's reign of terror, invaded Cambodia. The Vietnamese forces, better equipped and organized, quickly overthrew the Khmer Rouge regime, driving them into the jungles along the Thai border. The Vietnamese intervention, while ending the genocide, also marked the beginning of a decade-long occupation of Cambodia. The international community was divided on how to address the situation, with some supporting the Vietnamese-backed government and others recognizing the exiled Khmer Rouge as the legitimate representative of Cambodia. To Section 7, the legacy of Angkar, a nation scarred. The Khmer Rouge's reign of terror left an indelible scar on Cambodian society. The country lost an estimated 25% of its population, decimating a generation and leaving behind a legacy of trauma and loss. The economy and infrastructure lay in ruins. Years of conflict and the Khmer Rouge's disastrous policies had destroyed Cambodia's agricultural sector, once the backbone of its economy. The social fabric of Cambodian society was shattered. Families were torn apart. Trust was eroded, and traditional values were suppressed. The psychological scars of the genocide run deep, affecting generations of Cambodians. Rebuilding Cambodia after the Khmer Rouge was an immense challenge. The country faced the daunting task of healing its wounds, seeking justice for the victims, and rebuilding its economy and infrastructure from the ground up. Section 8, Justice, delayed but not denied the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. For years, justice for the victims of the Cambodian genocide seemed elusive. Pol Pot, after being ousted from power, lived in relative obscurity until his death in 1998. Many other Khmer Rouge leaders remained at large, some even holding positions of power. In 2006, after years of negotiations between Cambodia and the United Nations, the Extraordinary Chambers in the Courts of Cambodia, commonly known as the Khmer Rouge Tribunal, was established. Its mandate was to try senior leaders of the Khmer Rouge regime for crimes against humanity, genocide and war crimes. The tribunal faced numerous challenges, including political interference, funding shortages, and the difficulty of gathering evidence after decades of turmoil. Despite these obstacles, the ECCC achieved some notable convictions. Kaing Guek EAV, also known as Dutch, the commandant of Tuol Sleng prison, was convicted of crimes against humanity and sentenced to life in prison in 2010. Nuon Chea, the Khmer Rouge's chief ideologue, and Khieu Samphan, the former head of state, were convicted of genocide and sentenced to life in prison in 2018. Section 9. Keeping the memory alive, education and remembrance in Cambodia. Cambodia today is a nation still grappling with the legacy of the Khmer Rouge. The scars of the genocide run deep, but there is a determined effort to ensure that the atrocities are never forgotten and that future generations learn from the past. Memorials and museums such as the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum and the Choeung Ek Memorial stand as solemn reminders of the horrors of the Khmer Rouge regime. In recent years, innovative initiatives like the Mobile Museum Bus have been launched to educate younger generations, particularly those in rural areas who may not have access to memorials in Phnom Penh. These efforts aim to bridge the knowledge gap and ensure that the memory of the genocide lives on. The Cambodian people have shown incredible resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. By confronting their past, seeking justice, and educating future generations, they are working to build a better future for their country. The world, in turn, has a responsibility to remember the victims, support Cambodia's journey toward healing, and learn from this dark chapter in human history.